The RBA has spared borrowers an 11th rate rise as it hits pause, keeping the official cash rate at 3.6%. But economists were quick to warn Australians this relief is only temporary.
We felt that with economic data really suggesting that the economy is slowing, particularly in terms of retail spending, that it was time for them to pause and assess the incoming data and wait for the next inflation report in late April, the one that is quarterly and the one that the Reserve Bank focuses on.
And here's Labor's response to the rate rise, or the rate pause, I should say, actually taking credit for it.
But I think everyone will recognise that it will take more than one budget to deal with the inflation challenge that we see in our economy, which has been fuelled by some of those global price shocks.
And that's Finance Minister Katie Gallagher. Let's bring in now Assistant Shadow Treasurer Stuart Robert. Stuart, good to see you this afternoon. In your view, was it right for the RBA to hit pause today?
I think it was line ball. The four big banks' economists were split down the middle as to whether a further rate rise should go ahead or whether they should pause and ascertain the impact from what has been the sharpest increase of the cash rate, I think, in modern Australian history. So I think it's appropriate. It would have been appropriate either way, funnily enough, but I think it's appropriate just to see, because there's a long tail in every RBA decision. So they'll be looking now. The key measure, though, if you look through the RBA minutes, it's the last couple paragraphs where the sting's in the tail. They make it very clear that the path to a soft landing is very narrow, that they will do whatever it takes to keep inflation under control, including expanding the cash rate. So I think there's more to come.
Yeah, I think there is too. And, you know, we're 6.8% inflation. So we've got probably a year or even two until we get back to their target level of 2 to 3 or 2 to 4%. Now, you know, I have to say, of course, no one wants rates to rise. But you know, you have to question whether the RBA has a proper strategy here. You can understand central banks in other areas, in other countries, pausing rates because they have been tackling inflation for a lot longer than Australia has. The RBA was too slow to start raising rates, and Philip Lowe has faced a lot of criticism for that. Inflation here is still too high. So Stuart, the concern is that they're now pausing rates because of turmoil overseas.
Yes and no. You say no one wants rates to rise. Not exactly true, Sharri. Whilst mortgage owners and those who are investing and seeing the economy grow, they don't want rates to rise. And I'm firmly in their camp. But there are Australians, especially pensioners who are on fixed incomes with no debt. They want rates to rise because the rate or the return on their deposits goes up. Likewise, if our rates don't keep up with other major capital markets, you get capital flows outside of Australia. So it's a very difficult balance that also affects the Australian dollar to try and get that level right. And yes, they're concerned about what's happening overseas. But remember, on average, over 20 banks in the US fail every year. There's 4,500 banks. They've only had a few fail so far, so more will go. And SVB had its own problems anyway, as did Credit Suisse. I think the Reserve Bank, and you read through its minutes, is more interested to say, well, we've done this so many times, let's pause, let's see it flow through, let's have a bit of a look. But that last couple of paragraphs made it very clear, this is not the end of the matter by a long shot.
I guess the point is, you know, whether they actually know what they're doing, because they're flip-flopping on strategy here. And a lot of economists have argued that monetary policy should be focusing on the bigger picture, the macro picture, like inflation, rather than responding to turmoil in the financial markets.